Welcome to Talk Time with Tracy. Today, I have with me my daughter Anna. Anna and I are going to have a little fun today so that you can get an opportunity to know a little bit more about me and learn a little bit about my daughter Anna. I thought it would be a fun thing to do as far as introducing my daughter to you and a way to just have a nice conversation on the couch with Tracy. So, I'm going to let my daughter tell you a little bit about what she's doing right now since she's graduated from Cross Point Academy in Bremerton. Yes.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Anna. As you know, I'm currently a graduate student at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I'm doing my PhD. I just finished my master's degree. Whoop-de-doo, yes. So I'm just working towards a PhD now, living in Champaign. I did go to Fisk University for my undergraduate degree, graduated in 2019. So now I'm in Illinois. After those 4 years in Tennessee, I've moved forward. So I'm just gonna have a nice little conversation with my mom. She's one of my biggest inspirations and one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. So, Mom, my first question for you, if you're ready to dive right in,
Let's dive right
is when did you know that you wanted to become an attorney?
in. Wow. It was early on. I remember as a kid watching television and being in school and kind of looking at teachers around and um, nurses and just different professionals. But the person who I identified with really kind of the most was Claire Huxtable in The Cosby Show, and her being an attorney, and the Brownstones in New York City, being from Chicago, just really resonated with me and in my spirit, and it always stuck with me. I tried being a candy striper when I was in high school. Me and one of my good high school mates, we went through a program at St. Anne's Hospital in Chicago on the west side of Chicago. Um, and I think it was just that caregiver side of wanting to help people and considering the medical field as well as the legal field. So yeah, I pretty much, it's always been there.
I feel the same like with me wanting to be like an educator. I've always wanted to teach and like always looked up to the teachers I had.
Mhm.
And so I understand like connecting with something that you want to do.
Mhm.
So describe what you love about being an attorney.
The biggest thing is being able to give back and help those that are less fortunate and those in our communities that have not had access to just services, and those that have felt restricted and restrained from being able to ask for help because of a lack of resources or a lack of knowledge of where to seek help. And I really feel that that's important, that as professionals and as leaders, there's a duty that we have to give back and to give of ourselves when we have received so much. And I believe that to whom much is given, much is required.
Mhm.
And when you look back at the steps along the way and being introduced to the legal field, two different careers, two different professionals, I didn't introduce myself to those things. There were other people who learned of my interests and took an interest in me and said, okay, come along and do these things. So there's so much need. In criminal law, you can have an attorney assigned to you. In civil law, outside of there being domestic violence or something along those lines, where you can deal with Northwest Justice or Columbia Legal Services, there isn't much in the way of help if you can't afford an attorney. So I believe that we have a duty to give back.
Yeah. What made you, I know you practice, of course I know you practiced law, and then stepped away from your business for a little bit to work in Seattle.
Mhm.
And then you came back and opened your business, and then you pursued your master's
Mhm.
degree. So like, can you talk about what made you want to go back to school for your master's degree in elder law?
Okay.
Correct?
Yeah. So working originally, I worked at a firm in what was the biggest firm in Kitsap County at the time as a public defender. Then branching out on my own, as a young attorney, being in court every day and doing a lot of things was great. And I even had my own public defense contract with the city of Bainbridge Island as a conflicts attorney. But things kind of changed. The dynamics changed, and I went to work for the Department of Labor as in a quasi judicial position. I had done a lot of pro tem work up to that point. And after working with the US Department of Labor in Seattle, it was eye opening to see all of the need with our elderly population, with our most vulnerable population. I was having conversations with employees that worked at Department of Energy facilities, and sometimes I was that only conversation that they had. And these were engineers and scientists that had worked during an era, um, places like, we have here in Washington, Hanford. So I covered a region, traveled to New Mexico, Arizona, working with processing of decisions for individuals who had been injured. And sometimes the injuries were not visible, but this wasn't a program that Congress has put together and set aside for those employees that met certain requirements. But there were some of the conversations were just amazing. And it just really kind of triggered something in me that there was such a need in this area. And then personally, your uncle had a massive stroke during this time. And I traveled back and forth to Chicago, dealing with the issue of not having any power of attorney or anything in place for an emergency, any healthcare directives. So I had to become his voice, and in that, I had to go into court and get a guardianship in the state of Illinois, in Chicago. Um, and even then, being an attorney, navigating that system was very difficult. It isn't the easiest system to navigate. Um, and even the judge acknowledging that I was an attorney from out of state, not there practicing, but there in the role of a guardian with the level of expertise that I had. It was just astonishing to be able to sit there and see the family members that were trying to help their loved ones. And shortly thereafter, Seattle University came and established a LLM, a legal master's program in elder law. And so the timing just kind of really came together from not only a transition from working for the government, but also um, what was needed on a personal level for my family and those that were around me, that where I could see the needs in so many of our most vulnerable populations being without the simple documents of a healthcare directive, be it fear of not wanting to have that conversation about what you want things to look like in your last days. But I always try to put it in the form of a gift, that this is your gift that you're giving to your loved ones of what your final wishes are. So that was really the motivator to go back to school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a easy decision. I was, I think, took little bit over a year to complete the program because of how the timing in which I started, but I was one of the first five in that legal elder law, legal master's program. And there's only a handful of law schools around the country that offer similar programs.
One of my favorite things about you is that you do everything with like a deeper purpose. Like it's not just like, I want to go back to school. It's like, this is why, and you really want to serve your community. So I love you, girl. Okay, next question. Can you talk a little bit about like other experiences that you have in the legal field outside of your practice? I know you talked about your experience working for the Department of Labor, but like other things that you've been able to do as an attorney or before you went to law school. So go ahead.
So before I went to law school, I worked, I was in the Navy, and the Navy, of course, brought me here. I began to go to school at night when I had my day shift to finish up my education. And one of the jobs that I had when I was in the reserves was working as a counselor, a juvenile rehabilitative counselor, and as a crisis counselor as well. And then at the group in the group home setting. Um, so a lot has changed since then. There were a lot more programs for young people when they had encounters with law enforcement or criminal history, and there was a lot more focus on rehabilitative programs. And I was introduced to a lot of the programs. What was Maple Lane. There's still Green Hill schools down in the Chehalis area. And then Mission Creek used to be a juvenile rehabilitative facility, not as high security as Maple Lane and Green Hill Schools was, but the students that were there and once the offender, so getting them ready to be brought back home after their time was served, got a chance to do firefighting, as a part of the learning programs that they were in. And so it was a nice skill set that they could learn. And I really believe that it was a way to, while you're focusing on making sure that you're punished for your crime, you're also teaching them how to not have to go back to that same way of survival that they felt was their only option, or whatever the family dynamics were that existed. They learned something different. They learned a different sense of responsibility. And I think that that's really key when we're looking at the justice system as a whole and how it affects families. But so my career has always been working with children, at-risk children, in that arena. And I served on the YWCA board, where of course, the focus was on empowering women and listening to their voices and understanding domestic violence. I took the 40-hour domestic violence training. I think I was still in the reserves, just wanting to learn more about the topics and the issues from things that were close to home as well as those that were around me. So my service on the board came my last year of law school, and I worked with RJ Reynolds, who was an attorney with the government, and closely with Linda Joyce, and they created a student position for me. So it was really neat, a neat opportunity, and being able to see and connect with leaders in the community. But further back than that was working with Al Colvin on the Martin Luther King Scholarship, our first Black city councilman, for a Tuskegee Airman, being in the presence of such historic just the historic presence that he represented. And just because you kind of think about it and you say, he, the individual is history himself as a Tuskegee Airman. And so always feeling humbled and wanting to serve is what I learned from those leaders during that time. And just early on involvement as a young person, because I was what 19 when I came here. So just even though I was in the Navy, I still feel a feeling, and I can remember saying kiddo, kiddo, and you know, but just the humbleness and spirit that guided me through all of the community opportunities that I had. Was honored to be the graduation speaker at Olympic College when I went there, graduating in 92. But from there, staying connected to just the organizations as a whole and serving on a statewide level once I did become an attorney on the Board of Governors, coming full circle. Because I think it's important that not only we serve in our community, but we serve where we can make differences in partnering with organizations outside of our community, that we can bring that information back into our community to make it better. And the collaborations on a statewide level that I've been able to have with working with the Supreme Court justices through my activities at the bar has just been very impactful on who I am as an individual, but also my service that I feel is needed in the community. So those are just a few things. Yes. And currently, of course, I'm the NAACP president. I'm also president of the Kitsap Community Resources Board. And I work still with the Bar Association as vice president of the Washington State Bar Foundation Board. And they're all kind of still linked in purpose. It's the Bar Foundation Board gives money and supports legal programs in the community, and we've given out community grants. And KCR helping in the Kitsap community for housing, training, just daycare, preschool. It's all bettering our community as a whole. And of course, the NAACP promoting civil rights for all, not one particular group of people, but for all people. And the work that I've been able to do there with the police departments, our sheriff's departments, our Washington State Patrol, and providing educational tools and resources as a whole so that we can learn more about each other, be able to be in a community space and have conversations and not you're the enemy, and to break down fears and barriers is really a part of finding a common ground of who we are. And with that, we're stronger as a community. And it keeps us from having to be reactive to something happening. If we're proactive and intentional in everything that we're doing, then we can stay a strong community and we can be an example. And you don't ever have to look at saying, well, what's happening over in Seattle or what's happening over here? It's gonna, come and affect us. You don't have to have those fears because you know your neighbors, you know the law enforcement community, you know those that you run into, and it's, hey, how you doing? Businesses supporting the small businesses, and even with looking at Amazon coming in, they've from when they first came into the community, they've begun to invest in the communities in which they have brought their businesses in, and that's a plus. So that's really a lot that your mama said.
Yes, it's okay though. You're doing great. Okay, so you just talked about all of the different experiences that you've had in your past and what you're working on now. And we know you are on a journey as we speak. You're on a journey to become a Bremerton Municipal Court judge. So I just want you to talk to me about and talk to us about like why you're on this journey, what it means to you, and just like the significance of it to you and to your community.
So, being a candidate for Bremerton Municipal Court Judge is one that you don't decide lightly. You don't running for any position. Judicial races are nonpartisan, and it's still political. You're still exposing yourself and opening up um, what have commonly been private things to the public so that they can get to know you as a person to be able to make the right decision in choosing you for that next leadership position as a judicial officer. And for me, I've never taken anything lightly and tried my best not to take anything for granted because tomorrow isn't promised. And one of the things that I say often is the graveyard is the richest place on earth. And you say, why is the graveyard the richest place on earth? Because of untapped potential. So I don't want to be that individual who later wishes I would have taken the journey or would have done something differently. I believe that my background and experience from being a veteran all the way up to serving now as KCR board president is one in which you see service in my actions and the things that I've done over the years. And being a leader is really being a good servant, being able to humble yourself enough to know that it's not about you as an individual. It's about the individuals that come in front of you and an opportunity for them to be heard. And you have to be a good listener. If you've spent your career talking at people and not talking to people and listening, I don't believe that sets it out for it to be a good judicial officer. But my experience over the years in multi judicial roles, from working with the Washington State Child Support Division with so many pro se litigants, working in the quasi judicial positions with the federal government, being able to have sat as a municipal court judge pro tem, as a district court judge pro tem, in many jurisdictions with high volume cases, and then looking at the resources that they have and the programs that they have, taking all of that information and bringing it into the city of Bremerton are assets that I have that I believe are needed in our community. And I want to continue to be a mentor. I've been a mentor for a number of years and just finished up this school year with the Bremerton Avid program. And being there in this virtual environment was challenging. It was challenging for the kids. It was challenging not to be able to sit next to the kids and really kind of just deep dive into how their day was. But putting that all aside and in that virtual world, still being able to say, how are you doing? How's it going? Tell me a little bit more about how you're feeling about finals in this atmosphere. How are you feeling about schools probably going back to part-time? But even looking at how the teachers had to adjust. So every component there, listening and taking that skill set of knowing that it's your job to ensure due process, and that there's due process, and that when people come into court, they can be heard. And that's something as small as a traffic infraction, parking ticket. Because this is the level of court that can make or break what happens to that individual down the line, whether they go into a spiral of a financial restraints that lead to debtors' prisons under legal financial obligations, but also that one little thing that may have caused them to have to take a day off work, that may have caused this to happen. You don't know a person's story unless you truly listen to it. And not that I hear you, listen to it, but truly listening and hearing, which works different. So my desire is to bring the uniqueness, the diversity in my background and experience, and even the diversity that I am as a person to the bench. Makes me the right candidate.
Okay, well, that was great. I'm rooting for you. So is everybody. That is all the questions I have.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here in conversation with your mom today.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
You're the best.
So that is our time today with Talk Time with Tracy, and we really appreciate you for tuning in and joining us. And we're in the month of June, so there are some great programs that are coming up that we will give you some flyer information, but Juneteenth, Resource Fair, June 17th, and the Juneteenth event, June 19th, are a couple of things that are coming up. Thank you.